a respected black federal judge, pulled over for no reason. Minutes later, drugs appear in his back seat. A cop smirks, cameras roll, the headlines explode. But what the officer didn't know? The judge he tried to frame had just ruled against police misconduct days earlier. 7 minutes of missing body cam footage, a hidden traffic camera, fingerprint evidence, and a federal investigation that flipped the entire story. The officer thought he was destroying a career. Instead, he destroyed his own. 5 years in prison, $28 million lawsuit, and a national scandal that changed policing forever. This is the story of power, corruption, and justice that refused to stay silent. The flashing red and blue lights weren't random. They were targeted. Judge Marcus Ellington had spent 22 years in the federal judiciary, calm, brilliant, unshakable, a man who believed the law protected everyone equally. He was wrong. It was just after 6:40 p.m. when the patrol car pulled behind, his silver sedan in an upscale residential neighborhood. Marcus had just left the federal courthouse after presiding over a high-profile corruption case involving police misconduct. He noticed the cruiser in his rearview mirror. He hadn't been speeding. He hadn't broken any traffic laws. But the lights came on anyway. He pulled over. Officer Daniel Harper stepped out of his vehicle with slow, deliberate confidence. Late 30s, clean-shaven, cold eyes, the kind of officer who liked being feared. Harper approached the driver's side. License and registration. Marcus handed them over calmly. "Is there a reason I was stopped, officer?" Harper looked at the name. He froze, then his jaw tightened. Judge Ellington. The tone shifted instantly. Something darker moved behind his eyes. "Yes," Marcus replied. Harper took a slow breath. "Step out of the vehicle." "For what reason?" I said. "Step out." Marcus complied. Neighbors began peeking through windows. Harper circled the car. Then suddenly, he reached into the back seat and pulled out a small plastic bag filled with white powder. His voice rose, dramatically. "Well, well, what do we have here?" Marcus stared. "That is not mine," Harper smirked. "Tell it to the jury." Within minutes, backup arrived, a federal judge, handcuffed, on his own street, and someone was recording. The arrest made headlines within hours. Federal judge arrested on drug charges. Cable news ran the footage non-stop. The optics were devastating. Judge Marcus Ellington was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. But something wasn't right. The body cam footage had gaps, 7 minutes missing. 7 critical minutes. Harper claimed he found the drugs during a probable cause search. But there was no probable cause. No traffic violation, no visible contraband, and no warrant. Meanwhile, Marcus remained calm. He requested federal review, because he knew something most people didn't. Earlier that week, he had denied qualified immunity. In a civil rights lawsuit involving excessive force by the same police department Harper worked for, Harper's name was mentioned in sealed testimony. Coincidence? Unlikely. The FBI quietly opened an internal inquiry, and then they found something explosive. Traffic cam footage from a nearby intersection showed Harper walking to his patrol car before approaching Marcus's vehicle. He opened his trunk, removed something, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. That something matched the size of the evidence bag. The narrative began to shift. 3 months later, federal court. But this time, Marcus wasn't on the bench. He was seated at the plaintiff's table. The Department of Justice had filed criminal charges against Officer Daniel Harper. Evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, civil rights violations, perjury. The courtroom was packed. Media, activists, legal scholars. The prosecution presented the timeline, the missing body cam minutes, the traffic cam footage, GPS, data showing Harper parked behind Marcus for over 3 minutes before initiating lights, And then came the forensic analysis. The plastic bag? No fingerprints from Marcus, but partial prints from Harper. The courtroom gasped. Harper's defense tried to argue contamination, but then an internal affairs email surfaced. Harper had previously been investigated for targeting minority drivers. Disproportionately, the judge presiding over the trial didn't mince words. This was not policing. This was persecution. After 6 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours. Guilty on all major counts. Harper collapsed into his chair, but the story wasn't over. Criminal conviction was only half the battle. Judge Marcus Ellington filed a civil lawsuit against Harper and the department for malicious prosecution, defamation, emotional distress, violation of constitutional rights. The damage to his reputation had been immense. Threats, media speculation, public humiliation. Even after charges were dropped, the stain lingered. During the civil trial, expert witnesses testified about reputational harm to federal officials and the long-term psychological effects of false arrest. Then came the most powerful moment. Marcus took the stand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. He spoke slowly. I have sentenced criminals. I have ruled on constitutional questions. I have trusted the badge. But that night the badge was used as a weapon. Silence filled the courtroom. The jury returned with a historic verdict, $28 million in damages, the largest civil rights payout in that state's history. The city later announced sweeping police reforms. Body cam policies were rewritten. Independent. Oversight strengthened. At sentencing, Harper faced up to 30 years. The judge delivering the sentence spoke directly to him. You abused power. You attempted to destroy a man's life because you believed you could. Harper received 25 years in. Federal prison, no parole eligibility for 85% of the term. As he was led away in handcuffs, the irony was undeniable. The man who framed a federal judge was now judged by the very system he tried to manipulate. Marcus Ellington eventually returned to the bench, but something had changed. He began advocating nationally for stronger accountability laws. His speeches were shared widely. Law schools studied the case, and one message echoed across the country. Power without accountability becomes tyranny, and justice, though delayed, still wins. The courtroom was silent, not the kind of silence filled with whispers, the kind that feels heavy. Final. Officer Daniel Harper stood at the defense table, hands clasped tightly in front of him. The confidence he once carried was gone. No smirk, no arrogance, just pale skin and restless eyes. Across the room sat Judge Marcus Ellington, not in his robe, not behind the bench, just a man in a dark navy suit who had nearly lost everything. Sigh. Sentencing judge entered. Everyone stood. The air felt electric. Harper had already been convicted. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury had spoken. Now came the moment that would define the rest of his life. The prosecutor stood first. Your Honor, this was not a mistake. This was not negligence. This was a deliberate abuse of power designed to destroy a man's reputation, career, and freedom. The defendant used his badge as a weapon. The words hit hard. Used his badge as a weapon. The defense tried to argue for leniency. They said Harper had no prior felony convictions. They said he had served the community for years. They said prison would be excessive. But then the judge spoke. Slow, measured, unshakable. Officer Harper did not simply break the law. He attacked the foundation of it. The courtroom was still. When law enforcement fabricates evidence, the damage extends far beyond one victim. It erodes public trust. It poisons justice itself. Harper stared at the floor. The judge continued. You targeted a federal judge because you believed your authority made you untouchable. A pause. You were wrong. Then came the sentence. 25 years in federal prison. Gasps rippled through the room. No eligibility for early release until 85% of the sentence is served. Harper's shoulders dropped. His mother began to cry softly in the gallery. But the judge wasn't finished. "You will never again serve in law enforcement. You will never again carry a badge." The gavel struck. It was over. As U.S. Marshals placed handcuffs on Harper, the irony was undeniable. The same cold metal he had used to humiliate Marcus on his own street now closed around his wrists. He didn't look back. Not once. But prison time was only part of the reckoning. The civil trial had already concluded weeks earlier. The $28 million verdict sent shockwaves through the country. News outlets called it historic, legal analysts called it a warning, city officials called it devastating. But for Marcus Ellington, the money wasn't the point. No amount could erase the night he was handcuffed in front of his neighbors. No check could undo the headlines questioning his integrity. No settlement could give back the weeks his grandchildren asked, "Grandpa, did you do something wrong?" That question had cut the deepest. When Marcus returned to the federal courthouse months later, cameras lined the steps. Reporters shouted questions. "Judge Ellington, do you feel vindicated? Do you forgive him? Do you trust law enforcement? Now?" Marcus paused before entering. He turned to the microphones. "I don't stand here as a victim," he said calmly. "I stand here as proof that accountability still matters." That clip went viral. Millions watched because something about his composure made people reflect. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. He was steady, and that steadiness was powerful. In the months that followed, reforms began quietly unfolding. The police department involved announced sweeping policy changes. Mandatory independent review of all evidence-based arrests. Automatic federal notification when body cam footage contains unexplained gaps. Random audits of traffic stops for racial bias patterns. The mayor held a press conference. This case exposed serious failures. We will not ignore them. Civil rights groups pushed for national legislation inspired by the case. Law schools began studying it, students debated it, professors assigned it. It became more than a scandal. It became a lesson, but the most powerful. Moment came nearly a year later. Marcus was invited to speak at a national judicial conference. Hundreds of judges filled the ballroom. He walked to the podium slowly, looked across the room, and began. "Power is not dangerous by itself," he said. "Unaccountable power is." The room was silent. I believed that wearing this robe insulated me from certain vulnerabilities. I was wrong. What protects us is not position. It is transparency. He described the feeling of standing handcuffed on his own street. The confusion, the disbelief, the humiliation. "But what frightened me most," he continued, "was not what happened to me. It was what might happen to someone without resources, without cameras, without visibility." That line drew quiet murmurs, because everyone understood what he meant. If it could happen to a federal judge, who else had it happened to? The speech was later broadcast online. It reached millions, and something shifted in the national conversation. Meanwhile, Harper's appeals failed. Each one denied. The evidence was too clear. The misconduct too deliberate. In prison interviews requested by journalists, he declined to comment. His name slowly faded from headlines, but Marcus's did not. He became a voice in discussions about judicial integrity and police oversight. Not loud, not dramatic, just consistent. He continued serving on the bench, but colleagues noticed something different. He listened longer during civil rights cases, asked deeper questions during misconduct hearings. Not because he was biased, but because he understood the stakes personally now. Justice was no longer abstract. It was lived. 1. Afternoon, months after everything settled, Marcus returned home from work. He stepped out of his car, paused for a moment, looked at the exact spot where he had once stood in handcuffs. The street was quiet, peaceful. A neighbor waved. He waved back. Life had moved forward, but the memory remained. Not as trauma. As reminder, power must answer to principle, always. The story of Officer Daniel Harper didn't end with rage. It ended with consequence. The story of Judge Marcus Ellington didn't end with humiliation. It ended with resolve. Because justice is not automatic. It requires vigilance, courage, and sometimes painful exposure. Siri, badge is a symbol. The robe is a symbol. But neither guarantees integrity, only character does. And when character fails, the law must not. In the end, the man who tried to frame justice was judged by it. 25 years behind bars, $28 million in damages, and a permanent reminder that no one, not even those who enforce the law, stand above it. And that night on a quiet suburban street, it didn't destroy a career. It strengthened a movement. Because justice, though tested, still stood. If this story moved you, if you believe no one is above the law, drop a comment saying, "Justice always wins." And don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful real-life justice stories, because sometimes the courtroom isn't just where justice is served, it's where history is written.